Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I hope you and your families are safe during these challenging times. Secondly, thank you for joining us for episode 2 of the GRC Virtual Supper Club. The topic is, will companies start to embrace the Zoom work culture, and how will this impact their risk environments? As many of you may know, the Supper Club is a global peer group network and not a sales event, with emphasis on sharing, learning, and ultimately having fun, bringing fun to governance, risk and compliance. Our second speaker for this evening is Chris Phillips. He is the CEO of the International Protect and Prepare Security Office, also known as IPPSO. He has 39 years experience in policing across the Met and MI5 and is currently advising clients, corporate, government and private globally on counter-terrorism. He's also helped deliver the UK counter-terrorism crowded places strategy. There's not many crowded places at this minute in time. And also he is a fellow of the Security Institute and Chartered Institute of Risk and Security Management. Please welcome to the stage, Mr. Chris Phillips.
Hi, good evening. Thanks very much, lady. Yes, well, funny enough, the crowded places, where's the only crowded places you get these days? It's actually in the hospitals, and hospitals are crowded. I can vouch for that. I was in one last week. But not only are hospitals crowded places, but also they are locations where things like these viruses are tested. They are places that have got pathogens and toxins and also radioactive sources. So actually, hospitals have suddenly become the focus of our worries, the government's worries, the police worries. Once again, and I think whilst I'm a terrorism expert, if you like, but actually this whole issue has brought up a huge panoply. Is that the right word? Panoply of issues around crisis management. And just to give you the example, I did some crisis management talks, and we did some exercises with a particular theatre a couple of years ago. And that theatre, the attitude generally was that there's nothing that could faze them because they could go and play elsewhere. They could really move with the times. Whatever happened, they felt that they didn't really need a great deal of crisis management expertise. Unfortunately, I read in the newspaper a couple of days ago that they're going bust because they hadn't given thought to the fact that they lose their audience. And I think Lee's got a question for you as well, a poll for this. It would be interesting to know how many people actually had a crisis management plan and how many people actually used that crisis management plan, and did it work? Did your crisis management plan work for this current problem that we've got? Be really interested, and whether now you're going to amend that crisis management plan as a result of this pandemic. But that's just one of the issues I wanted to talk very quickly about. The issue for me, following on very much from Stelios's presentation, is about how this is going to impact the future and what is the new normal. What is the new normal that we're going to face for the next 10, 15 years as a result of this pandemic? Things are being sped up, and whether it's shopping online or whether it's working from home, these things are changing the way we operate. And the one thing, as Stelios quite rightly mentioned, the one thing that criminals want is confusion. They live and breed on confusion. And what we've got now is a load of people that probably have never used a computer before, suddenly having to use it, and suddenly having to face all these phishing attacks that we're seeing and potential social engineering issues as well. That's a really interesting point. Did your plan work? Yes, that's great. But 42% of people here say that they didn't. And I would suggest across the country, I mean, we're talking about people who've got an interest in this subject, I think, here today. I think you will find that across the country, the vast majority of business continuity plans did not even consider this potential problem. So, and including actually the government. And I know that pandemic was at the very top because I was working in the Home Office at the time. We were doing all these the bits of work on what is the threats and the terrorism threats, and pandemic was right up there. But it's clear that the government didn't do enough to prepare for it. So we have to face crisis management needs to be there. But what I really want to start with today is the lone worker. This, I believe, is going to be the new normal. Many people now have got used to working from home. it's a standard thing. They found that they can do it. They understand that actually I can work 2, 3, 4 days from home, and I don't need to travel into the office. I don't want to go on the tube network. I don't want to go on the buses. So people are going to want to do this. They're going to choose to do this. And as Stelios has already said, there are huge issues with this, and I don't think many companies have actually thought these through. Now, Stelios covered a lot of the issues around using computers, but I will go over a couple of those again. But let's take this back to the first instance. When does a business's responsibility start and end if you are now employing people who are lone workers? Is it the moment they get out of bed? Is it the moment they leave the house to go and sit in a cafe to do their work? Is it none of those things? And how much responsibility and duty of care has a company got for someone who is now working in their living room? And I think these issues are ones that need to be considered very quickly, actually, by companies who are already asking their people to do this. And if you just think through some of the potential scenarios, as an example, if you're in an office, someone has an illness, a heart attack, there's going to be generally someone there to look after them and see that they're okay. But what happens if they're working from home and they don't get the necessary first aid? What happens, but they're still working for the company? What happens, as an example, maybe if you're asking people to go and work in cafes and hotels where they might be able to go and use the Wi-Fi? And this has already been mentioned very quickly by Stelios, but actually the dangers that you've got from people actually logging on to Wi-Fi systems, which are then interfered with. And one of the things that I've always thought is a good idea is to think of yourself as an attacker. When I joined the police, and 30 odd years ago, I was told if you think like a burglar, if you think of what they would do, then you've got a good chance of catching them. And for that reason, I've done quite a lot of work with individuals who have actually committed crime. And then you find out what their thinking is in order to think to work out ways of stopping that. And one of the guys I actually saw in a hotel and in a conference centre hotel, and he was able to turn off all the Wi-Fi and then log into everyone's computer. Everyone switched back into the Wi-Fi, and he had control of all their sets. So, have you actually told your staff how to deal with that? Have they got the VPN that protects them, or is it something that perhaps you'll only find out when someone's gone and done it, and you've got the issues to face? One of the other things I think that needs to be thought of is this insider threat piece. Your company, your secrets, the things that you value the most, you are now allowing to be looked at from home addresses, from people's cafes and hotels where they're going to be operating their computer. Well, let me tell you that the incidence of listening devices being used on people's telephones, on actually being planted into offices, are extremely high. You wouldn't quite believe actually how many. I work with a company that goes and checks for these things, and just how many they actually find when they're going about their business, whether it's in a flower pot or whether it's an adapter for in a plug, which is actually there specifically to listen to what's being said. They found them in big banks in the City of London. They found them in companies with a lot of important information, which has, you don't know, probably been leaked to criminals. So these sort of things are happening. And Stelios mentioned the number of phishing attacks. I hadn't heard that figure, but what I do know that there are just so many now people jumping on the so many criminals jumping on the bandwagon to try to persuade people that perhaps didn't use the computer or their phone a great deal beforehand to link onto a subject, therefore creating a huge threat vector which actually could be coming to your business very soon. Now, the whole insider threat piece is also something that really needs to be given more thought. We do know that your weakest point really is your people. It doesn't really matter how good your physical security measures are. It doesn't matter how good your cyber security measures are if the person that you're employing is actually the one that's giving the secrets away deliberately. And that's where we face a new rub, because now we've got these people who probably beforehand were having a face-to-face with members in their company would perhaps be a little bit more inclined to not do something wrong because they think they were going to get caught. Now, in the safety of their own home, are fairly easy meat sometimes for criminals who want to get information from them. So the whole insider threat piece, the amount of information people are allowed to look at on their computers or get access to, needs to be considered differently if they're working from home. So this is just bringing up new issues that really need to be considered. Face-to-face contact within offices is something that's probably going to be less and less over the years. And there's going to be many companies that are actually looking to do away completely with the full-time office and actually use the rent spaces within these number of companies now that are out there that actually allow you to rent a desk or rent an office. And these present a whole new set of problems for the security of individuals, the risk assessment of people's workplaces, but also the information and the people. How do you know who's sitting next to you when you work in a particular office? So these are all new threats, I think, new threats that we're going to have to face. And I think the insider threat is something that's just going to be right there in your face over the next year or two. And I think all businesses need to reassess and re-risk, if you like, people working from the home and how that works. And just the other subject that I'm going to bring up, just if you're not upset enough as to some of the issues that we face, let me talk about my specialism, terrorism, for a little bit. And what we know are people are radicalized nowadays, generally on the internet. It starts on the internet and it's built up like that. The vast majority of referees to the counter-terrorism units of people that are causing concern come from teachers and they come from religious people, etc. That they get to know, these people get to know and start talking about their problems. Doctors, teachers, and often religious clerics are the people that have been informing the police about the issues, as well as family members. And what we've had now, of course, is 3 months of people stacked inside their bedroom, looking at things on the internet. Kids who perhaps were not particularly radicalised beforehand they've been easy meat effectively for people that want to turn them into terrorists. And I think this is another issue that I think we're going to have to face, and it won't come in the next week or so. This is something that's going to come out over the next 6 months to a year as people become more radicalised, as they go back to the places that they've seen, and they are clearly showing signs of being radicalised. So I think you within your company, you within your life, if you come across these people, then obviously you've got to know what to do with them. And this is another issue for businesses, I think, that we need to face in the coming weeks and months ahead. So really, that's kind of where I'm going to finish up here. It's not a presentation to cheer you up. It's a presentation that's going to try and open up some conversations, I think, so that you can start looking at your own risk and where you need to confront these problems that I've faced, that I've brought up. And that's it, Lee. I've finished.
You still got time. It's like it's a knockout.
You scored 5 and 4. That thing could slip down at any moment, so I think I'll stop there. If there's any questions, I'm more than happy to take them.
No, absolutely. I know we spoke obviously prior to this, prepping for this event, and you've also spoken at the event we did in the Grap show with Joan Keevil and Ariane Chappelle. You also mentioned, a bit about the duty of care, which was my gag about, if anyone knows the story about the employee in France who was in a hotel out of work hours, but committed extramarital affairs, but had a heart attack. But if I'm right,
with a prostitute.
Sorry.
With a prostitute.
Well, yeah, I was keeping away from that. I was leaving that out of the story. But the fact that I think French law or French corporate law meant that he was still under the duty of care because he was away with work, and his wife was suing the company for negligence or something like that.
I think the issue is you've got people at the moment that are, you've usually got people traveling around the world. You've got hotels that potentially aren't safe that you're sending to. Have you done any kind of checks on those? But also this bleisure. I mean, you may have heard of the bleisure piece, where a person will go on holiday go to work, maybe use Paris as the example, go to Paris on a work trip, and then take his family out, and then on the Saturday and Sunday stay out there with his family. Where does your responsibility start and end with that? Are you responsible for the wife and the children as well? Are you responsible just for the person but you've booked the flight back for them on the Sunday? So all these things just have to be rethought and at least considered by your risk people as to whether you're happy to accept that risk.
Brilliant. And there's quite a few questions coming in now. I'm trying to manage them all. Where is it? Somebody, I think David sent a question about whistleblowing, but I think we'll come on to that in the next section, so that's fine. So just that piece that we're just talking on then. So because it's the working from home, it came from a question from Mark, actually. How much duty of care have you got when they're working at home at this current state, right? In terms if they're working from 9 till 5 or?
Well, you're certainly, if they're working for you from the time that they start work. The interesting piece that I can tell you that I got from a lawyer was actually that if you're sending someone, if someone's coming into your office on a daily basis, your responsibility for them starts the moment they step in the office. However, if you're sending them to a work trip, maybe to a conference, the moment they step outside their front door, they're your responsibility to the moment they get back. Now that, of course, can include overnights, that can include an airport, that can include an airport or an aviation, maybe that they get COVID. Where does your responsibility start and end there? And I think what needs to happen within your businesses is to review it, to find some understanding within your own lawyers as to what your stance is, and whether you actually do a risk assessment at all. And let me tell you, one of the pieces of work I have been doing is with the hotel industry, and it's quite scary how insecure many hotels are. And the more you go, and it doesn't matter whether it's a 5-star hotel or a 3-star hotel as to the level of security being attained on that hotel. You know, if you care to look, there are reports in the paper. One hotel in South Korea which had cameras in every room and every bathroom, and people were paying on the market to view whichever room they wanted to view, and that's not a one-off either. That's been happening certainly in other hotels that they've caught them, and a number of Airbnbs as well that have had cameras in the bedrooms and things.
No, exactly, and I think that's a really good point to raise. And well, you know, we spoke about Joan, and Joan's got a question. So again, bear with me. I'll see if I can get Joan in very quickly, because we are at 0 on the barometer. So Joan, if you're listening, hopefully you are, I'm going to send you a webcam request, and I believe you've got a question about home equipment, which impacts HR mainly, but also impacts the the health of your staff. You have got a request, Joan. Hopefully there you are. Hello.
Hello.
Good to see you again. Good to see you again.
Yeah, I'm quite worried about what is known as display screen equipment, i.e. people set up at home, because I see so many photographs of people, when services are being advertised and they've got photos of people on laptops. And according to what I learned when I was developing DSE training, you weren't ever supposed to use a laptop for more than half an hour or maybe an hour at a time, because you can never get the perfect setup. Does an organisation have a duty of care to follow that up? Because obviously at the moment they can't do assessments for DSE at home. What's your suggestion? How are people coping?
Well, no, I definitely think that's an issue. And if you go into any cafe, you'll see people with their laptops on their legs, looking down at it, in everything that you would say is wrong about how you set an office up. So it's one of those other issues, I think, that companies are going to have to get their heads around, as to the first person that goes down with a bad back working on a laptop from a cafe is going to cause all sorts of issues for that company, I think. And you're absolutely right. And there's so many of these things that need to be considered. Do you put it in the contract that this is not your responsibility? People need to give them some information as to what they should be doing, and if they choose not to do that, then that's a matter for them, because you can't oversee it all the time, of course.
I think information, to my mind, would be the very first step, where you say to people, ideally get yourself a monitor and try and get an adjustable chair and a proper desk or table. I mean, at the very least, they need to be aware of the risks. But I mean, there's plenty of stuff out there, I think, if people
I think the other thing I didn't mention as well, which it does come to the fore, is people in.
But I've got some breaking news, but we've got to move on.
Yeah.
I can talk about Zoom bombing.
In violent households, you're working. People are working from home and they've got a violent husband, or they're in the middle of a divorce. These things are real life, and this is things that companies need to think through.
Well, we can pick that up and in the panel session, actually, Joe, and we can always bring you back in. Obviously, Chris, we can expand on that element, which is quite pertinent at this minute in time, because there's a lot of stories out there about home abuse at the minute and harassment at home. And I know Sean, who I'm just about to introduce, is from an ethics and compliance side of SAI on the learning side, and has a lot to do about, I think he's going to be talking about harassment. So it's a nice segue. Thank you very much, Chris. That was brilliant as always. I'll see you on the panel very soon.